hope you all had a wonderful time yesterday. I had a great time being with you on the bus, and I think we've got a wonderful day planned today. I'm very excited about the speakers that we have. What a turnout! Give yourselves a hand for being out here. We literally had no seats on the buses yesterday that were available, and we had a waiting list of folks who wanted to be a part of this but didn't move fast enough to register. So things are going really, really well. I'm glad that you all were able to make it, that you did get registered, and you're all here safe and sound. It's so good to see all of you. Like I mentioned last night, this is like old home week for us. It really is a family reunion. You folks are our preservation family, and it's so great to be with you here in Winchester. We have a lot of people that I will be talking about throughout the day and introducing throughout the day, but really what you're here to hear are the speakers and not me. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jack Owens. You all know Jack. Jack has been with us, I think, since he was 8 or 10. That's right. He was a youth ambassador for us. He grew up in the Starport neighborhood, the neighborhood of homes that were built on the historic Starport, so we can't hold that against him. But he got involved with us through that historic site, loved it, volunteered out there, learned everything he could about it, got involved with my predecessor, and I inherited him. And as he grew up, he started working behind the desk at our museum, and now he's risen through the ranks to become a rising star in the field of battlefield preservation. He's a very wonderful young man, a dear friend, and I'd like to introduce you, Jack Owens.
I'm not speaking on any topic. I'm your MC for today after Kevin. So I'm here to introduce our first speaker working on Winter's Retreat. Jon-Erik Gilot has worked in the field of public history for nearly 20 years. He's a contributing member and historian for the Emerging Civil War series. His research has been published in books, journals, and magazines. His first book in the Emerging Civil War series, John Brown's Raid, was recently published through SVBF Publishing. Jon-Erik earned a degree in history from Bethany College and a Master in Library and Information Science from Kent State University. Today he serves as the curator at the Captain Thomas S. Grand Army of the Republic Post in Carnegie, Pennsylvania, and works as a corporate archivist and records manager in Wheeling, West Virginia. Ladies and gentlemen, Jon-Erik.
All right. Everybody hear me? Good. I'm not used to the 9 a.m. time slot here. I'm used to speaking at round tables in the evening. But I've been assured that I have the next 4 hours to break down. Do we have any David Hunter fans? There never are. Kind of a weird place for David Hunter fan club to be meeting right here in Shenandoah Valley, right? We're going to look at David Hunter's campaign in the context of a very busy summer of 1864. We will consider the circumstances of his retreat from Lynchburg. We will compare how Hunter, his superiors, and his men viewed these events. We will look at fallout, the impact that this retreat had both on the broader war and on David Hunter's own legacy. And I don't anticipate we're going to change any hearts or minds today when it comes to David Hunter. Now, I'm sure most of us here, we have our favorite Civil War accounts, right? We have letters or diaries written during the war, or we have regimental histories or memoirs written in the years and the decades after. And in so many of these accounts, these soldiers, these veterans, they marvel at how they survived a certain charge or a certain battle, at how they survived a brutal prison camp, a terrible train accident, a ship sinking, freezing, scalding temperatures. They write with a sense of wonderment at how they survived when so many of their comrades did not. But how often do you hear about soldiers writing about marveling at how they survived a retreat? I mean, a retreat should carry you away from danger, no? How often do you read that a retreat was so desperate, the conditions so distressed, the miles traveled so great, even when so many of those miles were within their own lines, that these guys marvel at how they or anyone survived. Well, that's how the men who served under David Hunter in the summer of 1864 recalled their retreat from Lynchburg. And they left us so many wonderful accounts of really their desperation, their suffering, more than I could include here today. But once we get into it, I'm going to do my best to let these men speak for themselves as much as I can. Not advancing. There we go. All right, so let's set the stage with a quick overview of the Lynchburg campaign, the run up to the retreat. It's the evening of June 18th, 1864. David Hunter has an important decision to make. Now, Hunter, he's in command of some 18,000 troops of the Army of West Virginia, and up to this point over the past month, David Hunter has just been stacking wins, one win after another. He is placed at the head of the Department of West Virginia on May 21st, 1864. Ulysses S. Grant directs Hunter to go scorched earth on the Shenandoah Valley, live off the land, destroy any Confederate forces that get in his way. Now, David Hunter is not someone who you need to tell twice. He is a career military man. He is the most radical of radical Republicans. If we think of Abraham Lincoln as being a little bit left of center, David Hunter is hanging out over here with John Brown, which makes sense because they're both Old Testament Calvinist guys. He despises slavery, despises slaveholders. He's seemingly everywhere during the Civil War. First Bull Run, wounded in the face and the neck. Kansas, South Carolina, Tennessee, Louisiana. This guy gets around, but he doesn't make a lot of friends along the way. His men, his colleagues, his subordinates, no one really cares for him. But he does enjoy some friends in high places, like Abraham Lincoln. Hunter guards Abraham Lincoln on his inaugural train trip from Springfield to Washington over the winter of 1861. Hunter's perhaps one of the very earliest casualties of 1861 when his collarbone is dislocated as he's guarding Lincoln when a crowd swarms them at Buffalo Train Depot. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton is also a fan of Hunter, and it's Stanton who recommends Hunter for this latest Valley assignment. So when Hunter gives his orders, he gets to work. His army of the Shenandoah, at that point, they start pushing up the valley. They defeat and kill Rumble Jones at the Battle of Piedmont. He captures the vital transportation hub at Stanton. He destroys depots, shops, warehouses, and private property. He penetrates further up the valley than any of his predecessors. He forms a union with Union General George Crook and his Army of the Kanawha, thereby forming the Army of West Virginia, something Sigel and Crook could not accomplish earlier that spring. Now, Grant wants Hunter to push east of Stanton, to go after the Orange and Alexandria Railroad at Charlottesville, at Gordonsville. Grant even sends Phil Sheridan's cavalry west in that direction to meet Hunter. But instead of pushing east, Hunter instead pushes south. He captures Lexington. He burns the Virginia Military Institute, burns the home of Virginia Governor John Letcher. He even loots the famed statue of George Washington from the campus of VMI, ships it north to be displayed on the front lawn of the West Virginia State House at Wheeling, about 1 block from my office today. All along the way, he's destroying public and private property, infrastructure, railroads, mills, factories. This period really colors a lot about how we have remembered David Hunter since the Civil War, but tell me another Union Army general who has performed this well in the Shenandoah Valley prior to David Hunter. Next, Hunter sets his sights on Lynchburg, on the largest city in Virginia, and I would argue second only to Richmond in importance. You have the James River and Kanawha Turnpike and Canal. You have the Orange and Alexandria Railroad, the Virginia and Tennessee Railroad, the South Side Railroad. You have 6 turnpikes converging on Lynchburg, like the hub of a wheel, not so unlike Gettysburg. You have iron and ordnance factories, flour and textile mills, or iron and ordnance foundries, flour and textile mills, factories, tobacco warehouses, a sprawling Confederate military hospital complex, even a horse hospital. What do the Confederate armies need in the worst way in the summer of 1864? They need men, ammunition, supplies, and horses. Lynchburg checks every box. This city must be held. Now, Hunter to take Lynchburg, Grant directs that he put the railroad and canal out of order before either covering the valley or moving east to link up with Grant and the Army of the Potomac. Now, Grant said even holding Lynchburg for a single day would be invaluable to their cause. If Hunter were to take Lynchburg, the ability for Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia and Confederate operations in Tennessee, the ability for them to survive in the field would almost immediately evaporate. And Robert E. Lee knows this. He's already sent John C. Breckinridge back to the Shenandoah Valley, 2 brigades, to blockade the mountain passes to keep Hunter from moving any further south or east. But on June 12th, the Army of the Potomac breathing down his neck, Robert E. Lee orders General Jubal A to take his 2nd Corps, nearly 9,000 men, 24 guns, west of Lynchburg to hold the city. This is about 20% of Robert E. Lee's army. This shows you just how seriously Robert E. Lee was taking this threat. These were some very good fighting men and some very fine fighting officers. But Lee also reasons that if Early can defeat Hunter, he can then push down the valley, threaten Washington, perhaps force Grant to divert troops away from the Army of the Potomac. So this is high risk with the potential for high reward for Robert E. Lee. So Early's men had rode on June 13th. They covered 80 miles in just 4 days' time. This is marching that would have made Stonewall Jackson proud. These guys reach Lynchburg on June 17th, just as Hunter's army starts to reach the outskirts of the city. Now, for all of his successes over the past several weeks, David Hunter trips on the road to Lynchburg. Instead of a forced march from Lexington, he wastes time. He's tearing up the Virginia and Tennessee Railroad. He's burning some private and public property. Sheridan is turned back at Trevilian Station, leaving that Orange and Alexandria rail line open in David Hunter's rear. So things are starting to look a little bit hairy here for David Hunter, but even still, he is confident. He's saying that it would take nothing less than a full Confederate corps to keep me from taking Lynchburg. And that's exactly what David Hunter gets. As Hunter's troops reach the outskirts of Lynchburg, there are whispers of Confederate reinforcements arriving. As Early's men begin to arrive in Lynchburg, he pushes the defenses further out of the city. They turn back an initial federal probing assault late in the day on June 17th. But as he's waiting for the rest of his corps to arrive, Jubal Early runs an empty train up and down the track all night long. Tells the band to strike up music each time the train rolls in. Tells the men to whoop it up. He has one regiment, 51st Virginia, march and countermarch all night long. These guys said at the end of the night, they ended up only 100 yards from where they started, giving the appearance of more troops arriving in town. They sent prostitutes out through the lines to spread rumors of massive Confederate reinforcements. I don't have to tell you, prostitutes will only tell you what you want to hear, not what you need to hear. Do not trust a prostitute. Now, Jubal Early puts on quite the ruse here. Early writes after the war that, quote, had Hunter moved on Lynchburg with energy, the place would have fallen before it was possible for me to get there. On June 18th, Hunter sends some of George Crook's division around to the right and a cavalry division under Alfred Napoleon Duffier on the left to probe the flanks of the Confederate lines. On seeing this, Early pushes his men forward, pitching in the center of Hunter's line, catching the Federal Army off guard. Federals reel before pushing Early's men back closer to the city. The fighting at Lynchburg never rises to the level of a major battle, at least according to the official records. But even so, some of the Federal soldiers say that the artillery fire that they endure at Lynchburg is the most accurate that they face at any point during the war. One Ohio officer writes that, quote, the grape and canister, the rattle of small arms, the hurling and crashing of flying missiles, the explosion of shells, and the yells of the victorious enemy combined to make one of the wildest battle scenes we ever witnessed. As the day goes on, Hunter starts to worry that, in fact, it's his army that is outnumbered. Early could muster no more than 13,000 to 14,000 troops by the time everyone arrives in and around Lynchburg, but that includes invalids, guys pulled out of the hospital, guys pulled out of jail. Those odds aren't bad for any Confederate army by this point in the war, but David Hunter still enjoys the advantage of more men, more guns, more horses. But Hunter is also running short on supplies. When this campaign started, Hunter decided, he reasoned that one of the issues that Union armies in the Valley face is that they had these long supply lines that would get attacked. So he was going to take care of that. He's not going to bring any supplies. He tells the men to carry what they can. Regiments are limited to 1 wagon each. But as he's moving up the valley, he's carrying his men further and further away from their supply base just up the road from us at Martinsburg. So that is further and further that his wagons need to push up the valley turnpike to reach his column. So what starts to happen? Well, some of the wagons start getting fired on. Some of them start getting picked off. A few wagons here, a few wagons there. So the limited supplies that he has and the limited supplies being sent his way, not everything is reaching David Hunter. But as he's pushing south, he's running low on food. He's running low on supplies. He is running low on ammunition. In fact, once his army departs Stanton on June 9th or June 10th, they do not receive another ammunition train. What they have is what they have, and it's got to last. At the same time, David Hunter puts his men on half rations. So if you're getting 4 days rations, they better last 8, even better yet, they better last 10 days. One West Virginia soldier writes that, quote, "This is slim fare for men pushed on the march as this command was." By the evening of June 18th, Hunter's men are running out of ammunition, they are tired, they are hungry, they seemingly have an unknown number of Confederate reinforcements pouring into field works opposite them. Hunter could expect no reinforcements, he could expect no supplies. So he decides the most prudent course of action is to pull his army back from Lynchburg. That night, Hunter issues orders for the army to start pulling out of town down the Salem Turnpike back in the direction that they had just come. Now, Early realizes that night that Hunter's men are pulling out. But he doesn't know, are they simply moving around his flank? Are they trying to get around the city? Are they trying to push east to link up with the Army of the Potomac? So he stays put, early stays put until the next morning when he is satisfied that Hunter is in fact in retreat and moving west. He sends a dispatch to Robert E. Lee stating that, quote, "The enemy is retreating in confusion, and if the cavalry does its duty, we will destroy him." But here, David Hunter gets the head start out of Lynchburg that he and his men desperately needed. Now, if we consider Hunter's campaign up to this point as a raid, which many of the participants, Union and Confederate, did, we have to consider it a success. You know, Hunter's campaign has all the elements of a successful Civil War raid: disrupting supply and communication lines, moving in stealth and surprise, maybe not so much that, consuming enemy resources, striking fear into a civilian populace, and attracting the attention of troops and politicians far outside the immediate scope of the raid. By those standards, David Hunter could justly say that his time in the Shenandoah Valley was a success. But as Hunter will soon find out, that success can turn on a dime. Hunter claims that his retreat from Lynchburg was made, quote, "at our leisure." But by all accounts, these federal troops are moving hell for leather, trying to put distance between them and Jubal Early's Confederates. Early told Robert E. Lee at one point that, "I can't catch Hunter, they are moving too fast, they're moving at the rate of 20 miles a day." Even the Confederates had supply problems. They're running out of food as well. But the Federals, they are shedding anything that can weigh them down, perhaps aware of the reprisal that they may face if the Confederates catch up to them for the trail of destruction they left as they push up the valley. And the Confederates are righteously pissed at this point. On their pursuit, they are passing wrecked railroads, smoldering and ransacked houses, women and children crying in the street, possessions scattered in yards. Major Henry Kidd Douglas swore that, quote, "vengeance ought not to be left entirely to the Lord." One Louisiana officer called for no quarter, telling his men, quote, "catch the dogs and give them the bayonet. I tell you, take no prisoners." So Hunter needs to decide now, which way will the army move? One option is to move south and west, striking the Virginia and Tennessee Railroad, go after Withville and Saltville for the lead and salt mines, push into East Tennessee. But this would leave the Shenandoah Valley open. This is untenable for David Hunter. George Crook likes that option, pick up where he left off. If Hunter were to head back down the valley pipe, at best, he faces a fighting retreat against Jubal Early, and Hunter doesn't have any ammunition, we know. But also, the rail line to Charlottesville was left open as he pushed south. So any Confederate reinforcements could arrive in his rear, cut him off entirely. He could risk losing his army. Another option is to head northwest up into the Potomac Highlands. Think modern-day Route 220. This would carry him back to the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad at New Creek, at Cumberland, given the option, or given the potential for him to link up with Sigel's men up there in the lower valley. If Hunter can't move back down the Valley Pike, this is perhaps the best option to carry him back to the lower valley. But there are several mountain gaps there where Early could push through, fall on Hunter's command. He would also be moving through an area that is absolutely infested with Confederate irregulars, guys like Neal's Rangers, who Hunter knew would harass his column and particularly his limited supply chain as they're pushing north. Finally, there is no opportunity for resupply if he were to take this route between Salem and Fort Mulligan at Petersburg, West Virginia. That's a distance of more than 150 miles. So as crazy as it sounds to us today, Hunter's best option was instead to continue west into West Virginia, over the mountains to Charleston. There, Hunter reasoned he could secure steamboat travel to take his men down the Kanawha River to Point Pleasant and then steam up the Ohio River to Parkersburg. From Parkersburg, his men could jump on the Northwestern Virginia Railroad to Grafton. From Grafton, take cars from the Ohio Railroad to Cumberland and back to the lower valley. This is for sure the most roundabout route that he could take, but it is also the safest for a command with no food and no ammunition. And what makes this route even more attractive to Hunter is all along the way, he's going to pass Union Army garrisons at places like Meadow Bluff, Gully Bridge, Camp Piot, Charleston, Parkersburg, Grafton, Cumberland. What do all of these places have? They have supplies, they have ammunition, they have rations. Now there are a million rations stockpiled at the federal garrison at Meadow Bluff, sitting there ready to replenish Hunter's command. The distance from Salem to Meadow Bluff is only about 80 miles, about half the distance if he were to head up into the Potomac Highlands. But in taking this route, David Hunter was going to be taking his army out of the Civil War. The valley was going to be left open, perhaps for a period of a few weeks, but Hunter felt that even if it's the most roundabout, this is the best route to carry his men back to the lower Shenandoah Valley. And West Virginia has a reputation for weird stuff like this. In the fall of 1862, Colonel Joseph Lightburn takes his army out of the Kanawha Valley into Ohio for a period of about 6 weeks, takes an army out of the Civil War while the Confederates occupy the Kanawha River Valley. During the Jones and Bowdoin raid of 1863, the federal garrison at Rollsburg pulls out of town as far as Pittsburgh. They're left the Civil War entirely. Regardless of whether it's the right idea for Hunter to move back through West Virginia, it's going to take time. And for his part, Jubal Early wants to blockade the gaps in the Blue Ridge Mountain. He wants to keep David Hunter from slipping away. Early catches up with the Federals June 20th at Liberty, at Buford's Gap, again at Salem on June 21st, forcing Hunter to turn, meet the threat, slowing the progress of his retreat. But the real problem for David Hunter, the real danger, comes at Hanging Rock, just outside Salem. Now here on June 21st, Confederate troopers and the two guys you see here, Robert Ransom and Tiger John McCausland, they catch up to Hunter's artillery train as it's passing through a narrow gorge known locally as Hanging Rock. Now Hunter had perhaps more of his cavalry, more of his infantry guarding his supply wagons. At this point he had about 600 wagons. Most of them are filled with goods that had been pilfered from the valley. But this left several local roads open or lightly guarded as the artillery train is moving through the Blue Ridge. At Hanging Rock, McCausland's men find an open road. They fall on the Hunter's flank, slamming into the artillery train. They're killing horses, hitting horses in the head with axes. They're taking axes, chopping at the wheels of the artillery before the federal cavalry arrive and secure the scene. Limbers and wagons are blown up, the surrounding woods catch fire, some 36 casualties scattered in the road. In one fell swoop, David Hunter loses 2 full batteries and carriages. Other guns are disabled but pulled from the field, and now at this point David Hunter's artillery and wagon trains become a liability. One soldier in Carlin's Battery D, 1st West Virginia Light Artillery, writes that, quote, "We were just watering our horses when they opened fire and all we could do was run for our lives." Now, Carlin's Battery did put in outstanding service here in the Valley for 2 years. They lose 4 guns at Hanging Rock. They are out of the Civil War for good. They do not see active field service after Hanging Rock. Believe us, I met a gentleman here last night who had an ancestor in Snow's Battery. I believe it's the same for them. I don't think they see another battle afterwards. Between these two, they lose 8 guns at Hanging Rock. Following Hanging Rock, Jubal A is satisfied that Hunter is pushing west. He cuts off his pursuit. Now that is one less thing for Federals to worry about at this point, right? Wrong. Instead, this is where conditions really begin to deteriorate for David Hunter's men. It is 3 days before they could anticipate reaching civilization. It would be at least 4 days before they could anticipate reaching any meaningful rations. During that time, Hunter's column extends 14 miles, making 8 miles for the wagon train, 6 miles for the troops. Now, in many other parts of Virginia, you have the benefit of parallel roads, right? Where you can put your wagons and maybe some of your cavalry on one road and your infantry on another, cutting down on congestion, cutting down on dust. You don't have that in West Virginia. You are lucky, even today, you are lucky to have a road in West Virginia. So these guys are just eating the dust. They're making matters worse. David Hunter's rations have run out. Now think about the hungriest you have ever been in your life. Now imagine weeks of hard marching and fighting without enough food on any given day to satisfy your hunger. Then imagine a hell for leather retreat. You know, marching as fast as you can day and night. At one point going 72 hours with only 3 brief rests. And imagine doing all of that on an empty stomach. That is the reality for David Hunter's army at this point. These guys, you talk about hungry, these guys are eating dirt sandwiches without the bread. And we know they're eating it without the bread because on June 21st, the column is out of bread. The men are reduced to perhaps 1 piece of hardtack per day. An officer in the 36th Ohio wrote that, quote, "I can truthfully assert that for the last 4 days, I had only the crumbs that were left in my haversack, probably equal to 1 cracker." So how do these men seek nourishment? They pick up whatever they could find along the road, clover heads, green currants, birch bark. A surgeon in the 12th West Virginia recalled that, quote, "I often got off my horse and picked up grains of corn out of the dirt where the cavalry horses had eaten the day before." Now, there are accounts of cavalrymen falling asleep on march and waking to find that the nose bag on their horses had been removed by the passing infantry, who were eating the raw grain and corn. One soldier in the 9th West Virginia recalled seeing his messmate cook a dog. Others picked up undigested kernels from animal excrement. Can you imagine? I don't want to ruin your breakfast. Can you imagine how desperate you must be? And what about those animals? Like the men, the 400 animals had run out. Horses and mules are reduced to whatever they can scavenge along the roadside. Hundreds of animals begin to collapse in the road. Those that will not move are killed. I have not seen a definitive account of how many animals were lost in the course of this retreat, but the participants, the estimates from them range from anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 horses and draft animals lost, killed, or died in the course of the retreat. As the animals gave out, the wagon train is burned. A soldier in the 12th West Virginia writes, quote, "What little was in our train they would not issue to men. And when the wagons broke down, old Hunter ordered the wagons and rations all burned. He has no feelings for his men. We have not a man in the ranks who has any respect for him. We all wish some bushwhacker had killed him." Colonel Joseph Overton didn't mind so much seeing these wagons burned, writing, quote, "These wagons are nearly all filled with plunder. Officers have their tobacco that they've stolen and are taking north to sell. They're carrying away pictures and furniture, women's and children's clothes, chinaware. But footsore, sick, tired, and wounded soldiers are left behind." On June 23rd, the column reaches Sweet Springs. The next day, they push on to Greenbrier at White Sulphur Springs. These were pre-war restorative health resorts, places to go for rest and refreshment. That was not the case for David Hunter's men. The resorts were pretty much destitute by this point in the war anyway, but there are still no rations here. But at White Sulphur Springs, a rumor comes through the column that a new general had been placed in charge of the army. The men are excited. Oh, who is it? Who's in charge now? The reply was, quote, "General Starvation." By the 25th, the column reaches Meadow Bluff. Here they had hoped to find a garrison of 400 men and a stockpile of 1 million rations waiting to meet them. Instead, this garrison had pulled out several days earlier as Confederate regulars made an advance on their camp there. So they pull out of town. Whatever rations they cannot carry with them, they burn. As Hunter's army comes into Meadow Bluff, there is still nothing there for them. Colonel Joseph Thoburn records at Meadow Bluff that, quote, the whole command is out of rations. The men are starving, but have not yet commenced on mule or horse meat. But the very next day, Thoburn writes in his campaign diary, quote, we now talk of killing horses and mules for meat. That same day, the surgeon in the 12th West Virginia wrote that, quote, the mule meat roasted over the fire was perfectly nauseating. Hundreds of men begin to fall out of line, some dead, others near death. A soldier in the 21st New York Cavalry wrote that hard marching and actual starvation are disposing of the army in a wholesale manner. After marching 40 miles with no rations, a soldier in the 14th West Virginia wrote, could we stand it? We are poor and emaciated, skeletons of our former selves, without strength or energy. There are not many instances where you hear about a Union army on campaign suffering for hunger the way that this army does. With his army on the brink of disaster, Hunter is routinely moving ahead of the column with a small escort, presumably to speed up rations and supplies. So it's George Crook who is in command of the active column for much of this retreat. This kept up all the way to Parkersburg. Even Hunter's own staff cautioned him against how this looked and looked down on Hunter for it. Finally, on June 27th, a week after their retreat began, the column reaches Big Sole. They find a supply train with 70,000 rations. A West Virginia soldier recalled at this point that the men had been without food so long, they were so exhausted that they had no desire to eat. The officers had to force these men to eat food. Others gorged themselves sick, leaving nothing for those in the back of the column. One surgeon had to caution his men to eat slowly. Their stomachs had shrunk, they were eating too fast, and they were becoming sick. Thoburn's men were further back in the columns. By the time they reached these supplies, all that was left were 2 crackers to a man. He wrote, quote, a full ration had been sent, but was plundered by the starving division in front of us, but no time for grumbling. I never saw men receive food more gladly. On the 29th, the column reaches Gully Bridge, Camp Piot on the Canal River on June 30th. At this point, these men felt like their retreat was over. Now, they still had a long way to go, but at least now they had reached the safety of their own lines. Now, Hunter's plan on reaching the Canal River had been to utilize a fleet of steamboats to carry his men down the canal and up the Ohio. Naturally, as was often the case, there were problems that David Hunter had failed to realize. First was there weren't enough boats in Charleston. There had never been an army of this size in Charleston. Most of the infantry do end up receiving berth on the steamboats, but by and large, the wagon train, much of cavalry, they have to proceed by road up to Parkersburg. The other issue here is the rivers themselves. Now, West Virginia and Western Virginia, they were in a drought from late spring into early summer. Weather is very hot, very dry. For Hunter's command, they experienced exactly 1 rainstorm over a 6-week period between June 6th and June 27th. What does this mean? It means the rivers are extremely low. You think about the canal, you think about the Ohio rivers today, they're deep, they're wide, right? That's the result of modern locks and dams to control rivers, or to control transportation and flooding. But during dry seasons in the 19th century, you could walk across these rivers. So as these steamboats are overloaded with troops, they're pushing down the river, they sink fast into a sandbar. All the men have to unload, get the men off, get the supplies off, boat rises, they march a few hundred yards, get back on the boat, happens again a few hundred yards down the river. This should have been a time of rest and respite for these men, and instead it's another miserable part of their journey. Now Hunter arrives in Parkersburg ahead of his command on July 4th, begins arranging transportation on the Northwestern Virginia Railroad to get his men out of there. Edwin Stanton is livid at this point. Stanton has not heard from Hunter. Incredulous to learn that David Hunter is in Parkersburg. So once he gets his initial, "What the hell are you doing in Parkersburg?" out of the way, he wires Hunter that, quote, or that Early is back in the lower valley, that he's threatening Martinsburg, he's threatening Harper's Ferry. He wires Hunter saying, quote, "These points being in your department, you are expected to promptly take such measures as may be proper to meet the emergency." Now this is the first that David Hunter is hearing about Jubal Early being in the lower Shenandoah Valley. He had been in the wilds of West Virginia. You can go down there today and get cut off from the rest of society, so don't blame David Hunter for that. But as far as Hunter is concerned, Early had returned to the Army of Northern Virginia. This was a come to Jesus moment for David Hunter. Now he really needs to move. Hunter's troops began departing Parkersburg on the Northwestern Virginia Railroad on July 6th. They're riding on open-air cars, like you see here, along the Northwestern Virginia Railroad. These men are covered in smoke and soot. They are nearly suffocated in passing through almost 24 tunnels between Parkersburg and Cumberland. Many of the men, even David Hunter, is staying in Cumberland until July 14th as transportation is reopened on the Baltimore-Ohio Railroad to Martinsburg. There was a bridge, Cherry Run, I believe, that had been burned, so they had to wait for the line to reopen. But in that time, the Shenandoah Valley, there we go, the Shenandoah Valley, the back door, that was taken the day after Lynchburg, rare but the back door to Washington had been left open. On June 22nd, Jubal Early is satisfied that Hunter is in retreat, that he is pushing west into West Virginia, that he is not going to be an issue. Early turns his column north, pushing down the Valley Pike, down the same path David Hunter had quite literally blazed only days earlier. Early reaches Stanton on June 27th. He makes it here to Winchester on July 2nd, Martinsburg on July 4th, crosses the Potomac into Maryland on July 5th. Fights the battle on Oxy July 9th, and by July 11th, he has his army at the gates of Washington, D.C. Now, I'm not big on hypotheticals. I'm not big on what ifs. But consider that during this campaign, Jubal Early in Maryland, this was a campaign of hours and minutes. Hours and minutes are critical. At Monocacy, the 6th Corps reinforcements for Lew Wallace's scratch command arrived just in the nick of time, delaying Early's advance, perhaps saving the capital. At Fort Stevens, reinforcements from the 6th and the 19th Corps are quite literally marching off the boats as Jubal Early is probing the defenses of Washington. Now, it is tantalizing to consider what may have happened had Early called off this pursuit of David Hunter even a day or two earlier. But even still, Early is he's tied up at Harper's Ferry for a few days. He loses time later also. But as early as reaching Washington on July 11th, Hunter's men begin arriving back in the lower valley. It'll take more than 10 days for the entire command to make it back, but these men come back looking and feeling like a shell of the army that had left there only a month earlier. Hunter had lost around 1,000 men during the course of the campaign, killed, wounded, missing. But even still, during the retreat, he loses hundreds more men that are left along the roadside, that are left in hospitals at Charleston, Parkersburg, Grafton, or Cumberland. Many of these regiments will never regain the strength that they enjoyed as they pushed up the valley in the summer of 1864, and many of these men still had months of hard fighting in the Shenandoah Valley in front of them. The record for the 15th West Virginia notes that they marched 448 miles during the month of June. March, that's not including their rail or their steamboat travel. A veteran of the 18th Connecticut recalled that, quote, the brave boys presented a sad appearance as they marched along. In their thin skeleton-like forms could be seen the numerous hardships they experienced. Hundreds of soldiers are not fit for another day's march. As these men come back into the valley, they're running into some of the Ohio National Guard troops that were called out from the defenses of Washington. These guys are just kind of biding their time, waiting to be sent home. But they see Hunter's men arriving back in the valley, and they say, quote, this is the hardest looking body of soldiers we have ever seen. Joseph Thoburn writes that 1 month's time would not restore the vigor of health that was enjoyed before the raid began. To restore good discipline will require equally as long a time, and to make good the evil we have done is simply impossible. So consider the condition that these men are in as they arrive back in the valley and have to immediately set off on the next campaign, the next series of battles. Cool Spring, Rutherford's Farm, 2nd Kernstown. These guys are a shell of what they were just a month earlier. Now, David Hunter, he either couldn't see the condition of his men or he did not care to see the condition. He even had the gall to write West Virginia Governor Arthur Borman that, quote, the worst enemy to health and privation, or the worst enemy to health are not privations and fatigue. The licentiousness of an idle camp will swell hospital returns far quicker and more seriously than our men suffered on the march from Lynchburg. It is my pleasure to believe that no troops in the service of the Union today enjoy a better average of health, morale, and spirits than the forces composing the late expedition to Lynchburg. Okay. When the newspapers in West Virginia write anything about Hunter, or the condition of his men especially, he has the presses shuttered and he has the editors jailed. He actually destroys the newspaper in Parkersburg. In Wheeling, he has 2 editors thrown in jail for more than 2 months. One soldier in the 12th West Virginia writes that, quote, "I'm not at liberty as a member of this army to speak my sentiments, being forbidden from either praising or blaming my superior officers. I, therefore, say nothing, as my truth may not be told." Now, David Hunter returns to Harper's Ferry on July 14th. He attempts to reassert control over his department. He is initially left in command of the Department of West Virginia, but he is relieved of active field operations and his troops that were soon sent out in pursuit of Jubal Early. Now, Hunter felt that he had lost the confidence of his superiors. He tenders his resignation, which is not acted on. But the following month, the Department of West Virginia is folded into the Middle Military Division. Hunter is again asked to assume administrative control over the division, but to again cede field operations, this time to Phil Sheridan. Now, Hunter is a proud guy. This is more than he could stand. He tenders his resignation again, and this time it is accepted. Now, Hunter still has friends in high places. Grant and Lincoln, at least outwardly, maintain favorable views of David Hunter. But at this stage in the war, what are you going to do with a major general, a Union Army major general without a command? Where do you put him? So others, like Halleck and Stanton, these guys had soured on David Hunter after the Lynchburg retreat. This all but ensured that he would never see an active field command. Now, just as Hunter had accompanied Lincoln from Springfield to Washington in the winter of 1861, he accompanies Lincoln's body back to Springfield following Lincoln's assassination, comes back, serves as the president of the military commission that tries the Lincoln conspirators. He spends the rest of his life trying to shake the stigma of his Valley campaign, of his retreat from Lynchburg. His own 1873 military report leaves only 4 pages dealing with Lynchburg, dealing with the retreat. Even then, Hunter effectively just tells the reader to check out the official report that David Hunter Strother had penned in August of 1864. But Hunter fills the other pages with testimonials, like Grant's dispatch from June 15th that Hunter had, quote, acted with great promptness and great success. Even a Jefferson Davis speech, where he described David Hunter's campaign as, quote, an audacious movement. If you are a Union Army officer and you have to use praise from Jefferson Davis to try to make your point, you might have a problem. Hunter dies in 1886. He is still smarting from the fallout of that campaign, that retreat. Indeed, several of the lectures you're going to hear today involve the fallout from Hunter's campaign, David Hunter's retreat. But how did Hunter's men view this retreat? We're wrapping up here. Joseph Thoburn wrote that, quote, he was never connected with anything that I so much disapproved of as Hunter's raid. It was most disgraceful, sacking colleges, burning private dwellings, pillaging and plundering to an extent that could not be exceeded. In our engagements with the enemy, we were successful, but we suffered more than we inflicted damage upon the enemy. A veteran of the 116th Ohio wrote that, I have told of some of the hardships, but as I write, my mind runs over the trip, and I find my pen fails to portray our difficulties and my language far short of the trials and starvation our brave boys endured. There was not a murmur against Crook, but I won't say that some did not curse Hunter, and forever will as long as they can curse at all. I will leave Hunter alone with him and his God for his mishaps. Another soldier in the 116th Ohio said his memories of the campaign to the melody of Dixie. I'll sing for you for a minute. General Hunter on the Lynchburg raid, damn near starved the 1st Brigade. Look away, look away. The surgeon of the 12th West Virginia struggled to come to grips with what he endured, writing that the scenes which I beheld on that expedition of suffering no pen can portray, and I cannot bear to think of them. Rutherford B. Hayes recalled the campaign as the single hardest month of the war. He was damn near killed at South Mountain, spent months recovering, but again, almost died in his recovery. But here he says Lynchburg was the hardest month of the war for him. Later in life, he said Lynchburg was the hardest month of his life. And And Colonel William T. Wilson, the 123rd Ohio, twice captured, spends a Mexican War veteran, spends 10 months in Libby prison, writes for the National Tribune after the war that, quote, "I have fought through many wars, but David Hunter's raid was the hardest campaign ever inaugurated." Now wait, before we ask any questions, I don't know how many of you have been to Captain Thomas S.D. Post? Oh, shame. I'm no good at my job. If you haven't, we've got one here. We have a symposium next weekend. Captain Thomas S.D. Post in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, considered perhaps the most intact surviving example of Grand Army of the Republic Post. Next weekend, if you do not get your fill of Civil War history this weekend, I think you're crazy, but I like that kind of crazy, and I want you to come to Pittsburgh. $85, we do 2 days. We have Scott Hartwig, Dennis Fry, John Hoptack, Ashley Whitehead-Lusky, Kevin Pollack, John Banks, Tom McMillan, and Harry Smeltzer. We do raffles, we do silent auction, we do a big book sale. Ticket sales closed earlier this week, you're out of luck. But I like you all so much. If anyone wants to see me today, I will open up ticket sales for you, $85. Come to Pittsburgh next weekend, check out the SB Post. Do we have any questions? No questions? Yes, sir.
Picture of Hunter outside.
That one, that's late in life. I think that's maybe even 1880s. Yeah, that's later in life. Yeah, no mustache guy. He may have worn a wig at some point also. But yeah, no mustache guy. Look how sad he looks. Still smarting over there. Yes, sir. When he was in Stanton, he had actually sent some of his cavalry west to Charlottesville. They run into a little trouble when they decide to instead push south. Grant wanted him to push. He wanted to destroy the railroad, the Orange and Alexandria Railroad. But Lynchburg was also part of the equation there. If he could have destroyed the railroad and then pushed south to Lynchburg as well, but he ended up pushing south to Lexington instead. Yes, yeah, but not many people. A few guys, thousands. Okay. Breckenridge with Warden and Eccles. Yeah. Thank you all.
What a fantastic way to start today's conference. We're going to take about a 10-minute break. Please use the restroom, grab some drinks and coffee, and come back here in about 10 minutes for our next speaker.